Hey everybody, it's Andrew Brown and welcome to the AWS Cloud Project Bootcamp as we continue on to our implementation of DynamoDB, the hardest week of the bootcamp. I will try to make this as easy as possible, but I got to tell you, it was very hard for me to prep this content. Generally what we do is we journal our content out. So like, for instance, this is our week 5 here. And if I just go into here, this is what I usually tell you to do is go into the journal and go to week 5. And we will use a lot of this code to copy and paste. And the thing is that we did put some stuff in here, but a lot of it's not in here. Now the code's there. So if we kick around here, you can see I have this restructured and these DDB scripts here. But we're gonna have to recreate them or reference them from here. So as always, I've created a week 5 again. So I branched from week 4 again. And you don't branch, I just branch, and I've spun up that environment. And so once you're in there, make sure Docker is running. Before we do a Docker compose, let's go make sure we install Boto 3. So I've gone to our requirements.txt, and I'm noticing my font is a little bit small. So I'm going to bump that up there for you, maybe just up to 20 font terminal here. We will go up to 20. There we go. And so the idea here is that we need to install Boto 3. Boto 3 is the AWS SDK Python. Why is it called Boto? Well, Boto is a type of dolphin that lives in the Amazon. We're using Amazon Web Services. It's kind of a playful term to, I don't know, you know how developers name their libraries. They're always weird names. Now, the thing is that all the other AWS SDKs are named exactly what they are. The Ruby AWS SDK, the Java SDK, but this one's just named Boto. And the reason it's called Boto is I think AWS did not necessarily initially develop it. It was developed by a third party, and then they acquired it or something like that, and so the name stuck. But it's called Boto 3. So we've put that in our requirements.txt. And what I want to do here is, it doesn't matter what tab, but I'm going to go to the first tab here. I'm going to cd into our backend directory, and I'm going to do a pip install -r requirements.txt. And I'll just go up here for a moment and hit enter. And so that's going to install Boto 3. I think that's all we need right now for those requirements there. But that will be installed. And now the next thing we want to do is do a Docker compose up because we want to get, and I'll just bump up our fonts here a bit, or our stuff here a bit, so everything's a little bit larger here. But we want to get all those containers running because we are going to be using DynamoDB local, which we configured previously. Now I'm seeing some kind of error here. It might just be a superficial one. Sometimes we get those. So if I go over my tabs, are these running? No. So I'll just try this again. Don't know why that happens. We'll run it again. We'll see if it happens twice. Now there's no problem. So just understand that there's a lot of moving parts, and sometimes you have to, like wiggle the switch more than once to get the result that you want. So that's going to download those images and start up DynamoDB local. While we're waiting, let's go over to our bin directory and see all these things. I'm going to rename this and make a new folder and call this DB because we're going to just get a little bit more organized here. And I'm going to move these into that directory here. For RDS, I'll make a new folder there. Okay, and I'll move RDS over there. I'll say move. And now I'll just rename these files so they don't have this on the end of it. Okay, so this is just some cleanup that we can do since we are going to be adding a lot more bash scripts for DynamoDB. And, writing bash scripts is very common when working in the cloud because there's just common operations that you want to do, that you just want to do one-off or repetitively. And so it's just a common thing that we can do here. Oops, let's close that there. And we'll go to our connect here and just fix that there. Now, moving all these around could mess some things up. So I know in our setup directory here, if we click into this one, if we go down below, these are expecting this to be like this. So I'm just going to do that to fix that issue. I'm not sure if any of our pathing is based on this. So like here it says real path bin, and it goes up a directory. So some of these we might have to do a bit more work with, and it could mess these up, but we'll figure that out as we go, okay? I'm not too worried about it right now until we actually have to run it. And we will have to run this stuff to make sure that it is working correctly there. And I'm going to make a new folder in here called DDB, and that's going to contain all of our DynamoDB stuff. So going down below here, it looks like we might have an error. I'm not sure why we're having so much trouble today. We don't usually have issues. So it's not saying why. I'll hit space there. I'm going to see, did any of those start? No. I'm going to try it one more time. I know this seems silly that I'm not really reading into the thing and doing it multiple times, but it doesn't seem like we should have that much trouble. It should have already downloaded the images, so maybe that's the issue it's having right now, is downloading the images, so you may or may not experience this issue. But we'll give it another go here and try to get stuff running. So, yeah. Anyway, while that's going, there's going to be a few scripts we're going to want here. So we're definitely going to want to create our schema. So we'll say schema load. I mean, like there's create for the database, but we don't create databases. We create tables in DynamoDB. So we're just going to skip over to the schema here. We're definitely going to want to seed data. So I'll have another one called seed. And we're definitely going to want to have a means to drop the tables from scratch. So that is something that we are going to want. So those are the initial 3 that we will start with. And looks like our containers are working. Look at that. I just started it twice over. Now it works. No questions asked. Why it happened, I don't care. I just want to make sure that it's working. So DynamoDB, these are all running, so they're all in great shape. And we do have Boto 3 installed when we get to the back-end implementation. But, you know, the first thing we want to do is create ourselves a table in DynamoDB. So how would we do that? Of course, we're using DynamoDB local, so we could use the CLI, we could use the SDK. Now, obviously, this is on AWS. We could use the console. So the implementation can vary, but the idea here is I think that we should do this using the SDK because I don't know, I just want to use the SDK for this. And so what we'll do here is go to our schema load directory, and we are going to create this into an executable Python file. So I'm going to go here and type in Python 3, user bin env. And I learned the hard way. I thought before using this that I could just go type in where is like Python. And I thought that I could just go and put this here. If I was to paste in, whoops. I thought I could do this. I think I might have instructed that earlier and my keys stopped working. It's this darn clipboard. Let me just turn the clipboard on, continue. Maybe that'll fix my issue here. No, just problems all over the place. Okay, hold on. Does it work now? Okay, great. Okay, so I thought before that if we did this would work. And technically this does work, but the issue is that when I was trying to look for libraries, like the requirements that we installed, it couldn't find the stuff. And that was an issue. So what you're supposed to do is do user bin env and then pass in Python 3, and then it will be able to find directories. So that's something I learned. So we want to use Boto, so we'll type in Boto 3. If you're wondering, like, how do we know what we can do? There's the documentation for Boto 3, and we could just search and try to find those examples. So under here, there should be something for DynamoDB. And we can... I want to go specifically to that section of DynamoDB here, which is down here. And we could click into here. It's probably the client, so we'll click into the client. And then here we have all the commands like create table. And they have examples here of how we would go about doing it. Of course, we could also ask ChatGPT if it wants to write it. And this stuff doesn't change too often, the SDK, because it is reliant on the CLI, which is reliant on the API, and AWS is very good to keep about keeping those stable. They don't have radical changes there, so we should be more or less be able to implement this pretty cleanly. But I'll go up here and just start implementing this. So the first thing that we are going to need is the client. So we're going to go over here. I'm going to hit enter, and we're going to type DynamoDB and say Boto 3 client, and the client is going to be for DynamoDB. Okay, and then we're going to need to pass in some attributes here. We need to override it with our own endpoint URL because we want it to point to DynamoDB. So what we can do is provide here like an endpoint URL. And DynamoDB local runs on port 8000 on the local host. So what we can do here is do http://localhost 8000, right? But the thing is that this bash script, we might want to use this bash script in order to set up our tables in production. So what I'm going to do instead is extract this out here and put it above so that we can optionally set it when we're in development and then not set it when we want it for production use case. Basically have that, you know how we did that when we had like a bash script and then we had the word prod so that we could execute it for a different context. So that's what I want to do here. So what we can do is just do 2 asterisks, tribs. This is what in Ruby we call a splat. And the idea is that it will expand out the values here as if we type them in line. Since it's a key value, we have to do 2 of them. If we weren't doing key value, it would just be a single one. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry. Just follow along with the syntax here. I'm going to go ahead and call this a tribs. And we'll bring that down here as such. And so we want this to be conditional. So I'm going to set it initially to say like the default should be development. And what we can do is check on the sysargs variables that are getting imported. So I'll say, is there, what is the length of the arguments? Are there 2? And I know that sounds bizarre, but in order to get the first parameter, I believe, is the name of the program. And the second one is the first argument. So it'd be 1 and then 2. At least that's the way I think about it. And so from here, what we can do is say if the second argument that is going to be used, like when we type it down here, when we run this and we say schema load, we type in schema load prod, this would be considered argument 1, and this is going to be considered argument 2. And so here we'll just say if in the args v for, at least that's what I think it does. You know, if we do that, then that will indicate that we're running production, and all I want to do is clear out those values so they don't get set. Now, I'm noticing my highlighting is really messed up here, and I missed the 0 up here, but I'm just going to take a look here and see what it is crying about, because to me, it looks correct, but all the highlighting's off. And it could just be because we're doing this in a bash script. Yeah, I think it's just because this is a bash script, it is confused about the highlighting here, so just ignore that. What we can do is try to do chmod on that file, and we do have to do that anyway to see if that fixes the styling there. So we'll go ddb, schema load. Okay, I'm going to go save that, close that, reopen it, and see if it picks up the highlighting better. And it does. Okay, so sometimes when you have executable files, you have to make sure that they are executable, and then the syntax highlighting may fix. I don't know why that is. But anyway, so that is good. We are missing the in here. I'm not sure why that's still showing curlies. Oh, we haven't imported sys. Stands for system. And it should stop erroring out. Why is it erroring out here? Invalid syntax schema load line 11. Invalid syntax. It doesn't look invalid to me. Oh, you know what? I think it's just argv. There's not supposed to be an I there. It's just in. Sorry. Okay. So if we can find an argv1, if this value is in our args, then we'll set the attribs, and then we know we're working in production. So that's as far as I understand how that works. Again, my background isn't Python, but I know this for the most part. We're going to have to define a table name. Going back to the documentation here, there's a bunch of stuff here. So we need the table name. We need attribute definitions, key schema. If we have local secondary indexes, we can define them there. If we have global secondary indexes, we can define them there. The billing mode, provision, throughput, a bunch of stuff. If we're doing streaming, then we would do this. If there's something for security, for the security encryption, SSC, so server-side encryption, we do that. We can apply tags. The standard table, which we're going to stick with standard, deletion protection, things like that. So we have all our options here. So we'll just grab this big chunk here and maybe whittle it down to what we actually want. Okay, and I'll go ahead and paste this in here. And I don't like four level indentation. We'll bring that down to 2. So we definitely need attribute definitions, because you have to define the keys you're going to use, like your secondary or your primary key. So those are 2 that we'll have to define. So we have the attribute name, and so we said that we were going to name these generically. So we'll have PK for the attribute name. Attribute type, so we have string, number, and binary. That's what those stand for. So we're working with string. I know it's kind of weird syntax, but that is what they chose for DynamoDB. I'm going to bring the table name up here. We'll pass the table name in as such. We'll go down below here. We need to also define our SK, our secondary key. Oh, sorry, this is partition key. I keep saying primary key. Primary key and secondary key, so that is good. We'll go down to our key schema. So this is actually us saying which of the attributes up here is our our partition and secondary key. So a hash is the partition key. The old language was hash and range. So hash is the partition key and range is the sort key. Why they changed the language, maybe to make it easier for people. It doesn't really bother me that it's the old way, but I've been doing this for a while. So we have the PK, and that is going to be our partition key. So that's our hash. And then our secondary key here is going to be our range. So that is good. We don't need any local secondary indexes, so we'll take that out. We probably will use a global secondary index, but not right now at this time. We'll worry about it when we need to implement it. So I'm just going to comment this out for the moment. These are our two billing modes. So we have provision paid per request. Pay per request is actually called on demand. The console does not always reflect the API's naming. And so provisioned is what is in the free tier. And we want to stay in the free tier, so we will set it as such. Since we are using provision, we have to set provision throughput. If it was the other one, we wouldn't set this information. And I believe the free tier gives us 5 and 5, so I'm going to set that as such. For stream specification, I'm going to remove that. For SSC, we're going to remove that. Tagging is a good idea, but since our app is so simple, I'm going to take those out. The table class by default would be standard. I'm just going to take that out. Deletion protection is probably a good idea because we're in development and we're going to be dropping and creating this frequently, especially in the local development. We don't want protection on. By default, it is turned off. Okay. The only thing that is not specified in here, I think we have it all. Yeah, so we have everything there, so that is good. And I mean, we can pass it in this way, or we can pass it as a tribs. It really depends on how we want to do the schema. I think this is fine. In the journal 5, if you look at it, I did a little bit different. So up here, I just made it a dictionary, which is kind of like a JSON object. And I pass it in this way. You know, both are valid ways of doing it. It just depends on how you did it. The reason I did it this way was probably because I wanted to print out the values there. So I do that often. I'll take the attributes I'm going to pass in and put them in a variable and pass them in so that I can log out that stuff for debugging. But I'm not too worried about it. I don't think we're going to run into any issues here. So we have the response, and we'll go down below, and we will print the response and see what results we get. So this looks good to me. And what we can do is go ahead and run this. So I'll just drag let me drag up here. We'll drag up here. We'll scroll on down. And I'll just bump this up because I think my screen's small here. And we will go ahead and type this in. So we have bin DDB schema load. It says client is not defined. So I'll scroll back up here. We'll take a look for where the client is. So it says client, Bodo3 client. Oh, you know what? It's because here I called it DynamoDB and here I called it client. So we'll go here and you know what? I prefer just saying DDB. Saves us a lot of trouble here. So I'm going to go with DDB instead. And then we'll go up, hit enter. Give it a moment. It's thinking. I'm not sure why it's thinking so hard. Let's check our ports and see what is open. Do we see anything running on port 8000? I definitely do not see anything running on port 8000. So that makes me think that DynamoDB is not running. But if we go over to our Docker here, we have, it's not running. Okay, so let's go take a look at our Docker compose file. We probably commented it out before so that we were saving on compute. Absolutely was the case. So we'll go down here, uncomment that. And we will go back over to here and we'll do a compose up. While this is going on, I'm just going to commit our changes, our restructuring of the bash commands. And, you know, do your best to do good naming for, you know, these commits. I don't necessarily do very good commit naming when I'm doing it in the quick run because I personally don't want to make it super easy for people to just cut through that content. I want them to follow through the video. But when I'm doing grading, I definitely look at the naming of your commits. If they're good naming, if I can easily figure out what it is you're doing via those commits, it's very useful for me. Okay, so we'll just hit escape. It should have terminated and restarted up, but we'll go back here. Are these running? I can't tell. Looks like they're running. We just don't get logging. If we go compose logs, maybe it reopens the tab over here. Anyway, I don't really need to see anything. So as long as they're running, that's all I care about. But I still don't see. I don't see it. So I'm gonna do compose up again because I want to see DynamoDB. It seems like there's an error, so let's go back and see what the issue is. Nothing that is human readable to me. So I'll hit escape. I will try this again. I'll just stop all of them, compose stop, because none are supposed to be running right now. Maybe the up did not work as I thought it would, and we'll hit escape. Okay, so those are all now stopped. I'm gonna go here and do compose up again, just increase our size here. And so now it's pulling DynamoDB local. You can see it's Docker is a bit finicky, so you just have to have confidence and stop and start, stop and start, stop until it works. So I'll just give it a moment there to start up. I'll just be back here in 2 seconds, okay? All right, so it's still not working. What is going on here? Well, I mean, it looks like it's not working, but maybe it is. I'll go here. Are any of these containers running? Refresh. Oh, they are running. Okay, so again, have confidence and just double, triple check. So I believe that, yeah, DynamoDB local is running now. So we can go back to our first tab here, hit up, run the schema load, see if it works, fingers crossed. It outputted the table. So we got back stuff. So the table does exist. Now, how could we confirm that? Well, it might be a good idea for us to list out our tables and write some utility bash scripts. And I think that is what I had done before. So if we want to list out tables, you know, like it depends on what you're doing, but in this case, I don't feel like the we want to use the SDK because we're just trying to quickly verify information. And so I want to use the CLI in this case. So we did create our schema load. I'm just going to go ahead and create a new file here called list tables. And in here, what we're going to do is a bash script. User, and yeah, I mean, you could use the SDK if you want. It's just really up to your preferences there. Personally, I would have liked to reuse Ruby, but you know, I'm trying to be a nice fellow here. So all we're doing is doing the endpoint thing, just as we were doing before, because we want it conditional. So in the case that we do pass production as the first parameter or argument, it will not set the endpoint, and if it is, we will set that value there. Okay, and it will be a flag called endpoint. URL http://localhost 8000. This will make sense here in a second. So down below here, we want to use the AWS CLI. We'll just look it up, AWS CLI DynamoDB. Again, it's good to know where all this stuff comes from because when I'm not around, you'll have to go find it. So you should be knowing how to find stuff and not just asking ChatGPT, which may or may not give you the correct results, especially when this stuff gives you really easy and simple examples. So I just want to list tables. Okay, there it is. And we can go down to examples. And you can see it's as simple as that. AWS DynamoDB list tables. So we'll go back over here and we'll type in AWS DynamoDB list tables. And then we can pass in our endpoint URL and the backslash is so we can do multi-line. That should be enough. So let's go ahead and try that out and see what we can see. We have to chmod that file that we just created. So I'll go ddb bin ddb list tables. That looks good to me. Let's close this silly thing here. And now let's run it and see if it works. It didn't like our else here. I wonder what's wrong with our else. Oh, you know what? It's not end. That's a Ruby thing. We'll type in fi. Why it's backwards like this, I don't know, but that's how they do it. Still has an issue with the else. Oh, you know what? We're supposed to have a semicolon here. No problem. We'll hit up. And it says line 3 missing a quotation. I don't think it is. But we did get data back, so that's good. If something fails, we can do, and I think I did this before where we did a hyphen E. I don't know if I did it correctly. I'm just checking our old scripts here. Here, it's supposed to be set hyphen E. Otherwise, this negative E does not work. So I'm going to go ahead here and copy this because I feel like this was failing early, and if it is, I want to know. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. And I'm going to go ahead and hit up. No, it's still executing it. But it's working, but I don't like this. Okay. So there's something that is off here. Oh, you know what it is? It's right here. There we go. So that should fix that issue. We'll hit up. Great, because I don't know if that was just creating it on production. So if I go check my AWS account, I just wonder if I made that there. Well, I guess it would always default to that one, but it would only break production. So that never mind. It wouldn't have done it in production. We're fine here. So now we are just getting, I think, we're still getting that error. What the heck is that? Colon missing. What are we missing? Just give me a second, okay? I just want to show you I'm not crazy. So look here. Here's my example, like from before that I did. I'm just going to copy it. This is in the journal, by the way, from week 5. You can find this stuff. But again, we might be doing it slightly different here. So I'll go ahead and let's just see if anything changes. Not really. There was a space right here. Hit up. Okay, maybe this space is an issue. Let's take the space out. Does that throw an error? Yes, it does. Isn't that weird? So you have to have a space there, otherwise it cries. Now, it didn't cause any issues, but Bash is really weird like that. So, for instance, like in Bash, if you put a space here, it won't assign correctly. You have to hug it like that. So that is the requirements of a Bash script. But we're not getting any more errors here. Now, our output here is JSON, and I like to make this a little bit nicer. So what we can do is do output table. This works on any kind of AWS CLI command. And so now it's a table view. And I don't want this part. I just want to grab the table name. So we can type in query, and here we can just say tables names, which is going to select that one. And so if we go up, okay, so that's a lot nicer. I bet we could even go further. I didn't do this in the other one here, but I think what we could do is do, what is it, period list tables. Let's try that. I don't really remember, but we'll just try here, list. It might need to be in square braces, but we'll try here. I have a whole course on AWS CLI, and I don't even remember. I don't remember the query syntax, which is just me for you. But we'll try this and see what happens. Does that work? Okay, there it out there. But hey, it brought us into here, which is good because it will actually help us make a filter. So I'll show you what I mean. If I start typing here, it should start auto-completing. Query equals... No, it's not really doing it. That's fine. I'm just trying to make it nice and clean. I want to select one more in. Table names. Let's try this. I'm going to do that. I don't remember. AWS CLI query syntax. I want to do query. Oh, it's using JSE empaths here. So I'm just trying to see how this works. Yeah, see, I thought it was just dot whatever. You know what it probably is? It's probably square braces and then dot. List tables. Yeah, we don't really need to do this. It's just to make it nicer. I can't remember how to do it. We'll come back to that later. I mean, this is pretty clear as it is, right? So I don't think we need to just take that part out for no particular reason. Just to make this a bit easier to read in the future, I'm just going to do this. And also if we want to tweak it. And so now we can list our tables. Let's say we want to go ahead and drop this table. I'm really sick of that popping up there. So dropping should be pretty simple. It's probably just drop table. And I think for that, we'd probably want to use the CLI. So let's go take a look here at the CLI commands. We'll just type in table here. And we should, we got to go back one. Do we have drop? Nope. Do we have delete? We do. Delete table. There it is. We'll go take a look at example of a table. Very simple. So what we can do is go to our list tables here. I'm going to just basically copy everything in here. And then we'll go ahead and paste this in. And I mean, it's almost the same. We just go delete table, pass the endpoint. We probably have to specify the table name. I don't even think I need to look it up to figure out that's what it is. I'm going to do CRUD messages because we're really only going to have one. And I think that is all we need. Oh, well, you know what? Maybe it would make sense for us to pass in the table name as a parameter. So I think I'll do that instead. If that's the case, and this one, I think the syntax I'd like it to be would be bin ddb drop like CRUD messages, and then I would probably want it to do a prod like that. That's probably how I would do it. Okay, so this is what I'm thinking. So what we'll do is we'll just copy this, paste this down below, and so now this becomes 2. And then this one here is just going to be different. We're going to use -z. Now, I don't remember what Z is for. All I know is it checks if it's there or not, like the exact reason for Z, but we'll just do Z there. And then what I'll do is I'll just put an echo here. So we'll say no table name argument supplied, and we'll just say EG, and then we can take our example as we wrote here. Cut, paste. So that if we're missing that, then they'll know. And this makes it a little bit more flexible. We'll just have to name this table name here. And actually, this would be a little bit different. We would do table name. We don't need an if else. What we'll do is just take this out here, and we will say this equals $1. And when it gets to here, it will just exit out. So it'll come here, and it's like, if you don't have it, it'll just exit. It'll just say, sorry, this is not going to work. And if it is there, it will set it on the next line. So that's how we will do that. And then here we can just pass this in as table name. We don't need a fancy output for that. So that should work. So we'll go ahead here. And I just keep hitting Command S and that thing keeps popping up. So we'll just go and go bin dbd drop. Oh, we have to make it executable, no problem. U plus X db drop. And now we can run that. CRUD messages. Line 19, unexpected end of file. I mean, I don't see an issue here. Try this one more time. We're in the drop, right? And we're doing DDB, not DB. Unexpected end of file. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what is wrong here. Give me a second, okay? You know what I think it is? I bet it's because I don't have an FI. Even if you do an if then, you always have to have the FI on the end there. So let's see if that fixes the issue. And I mean, it did something. Oh, it entered in here. So there is still an issue. I want to see if, did we put in, yeah, we put CRUD messages in. But let's just go echo this out here. So we'll say echo table name. We can say like deleting table this, table name. Okay, and we'll try this again. Now it showed it as blank, so it's not taking that parameter and setting it correctly, which to me is a bit odd because it definitely is being set up here. So did I type this wrong? No, that is correct. Oh, you know, this needs to be on the outside. That's probably the reason why. Okay, so we'll hit up. And so it's saying that when calling the delete operation cannot do it for a non-existing table. Let's see if our table still exists. It does. So that means that this was not executing against the right location. I feel like it was doing not against the endpoint, but we have it set here. So if it's prod, then do this. Otherwise, do this localhost endpoint. We'll try this again. Drop the table. The other issue might be that we are typing the name of the table wrong. So I'll go here and check. Sorry, schema load. It is. Okay, so it's supposed to be called credder message. So I'll go ahead and drop that table. It dropped. That's good. So good. Okay. Great. So now we can drop our table. We can create our table. We can list our table to see what is in it. We do need to put in seed data here. And basically that will be our way of working through these tables and seeing what to get. So what would be the first thing we need to do? That's a good question. Anyway, let's just start setting this script up because I know what we're going to want to do is make this a Python thing. So we'll go ahead and go here and paste this in. Whoops. Freaking paste doesn't paste properly. We'll go ahead and copy this into our seed here and paste. And we will go ahead and make this file executable. So we'll say chmod u plus x bin ddb seed. And I mean, we didn't need the period in front of it like that. Let's do this. And so now that will be properly executable, but also we'll get our proper highlighting. So we'll go ahead and open the seed here. And we'll say import boto3. Okay, so what is the first thing we need to do? Well, we want to start implementing our access patterns. And so that means we want to seed some data. Now, over here, I do have in this seed file, and here I wrote a bunch of seed data that we can bring in. And so you might say, well, Andrew, are we just going to copy this whole thing in here? Well, let's just do it in parts. So what I want you to do is find this week 5 branch, go to DDB seed, and we'll just kind of copy paste the code each bit over so that we don't have to write it out in full, but we can make sure that we understand what's going on. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create messages because that's how we're going to get data in. So even though our access pattern that we had from the other day shows this, right? So we have all these access patterns. The first one we're going to actually be doing is creating a message or a message group with a message, right? So that's what we need to do first. Okay, so just because we wrote it ABCD doesn't mean that's how we implement it. Okay, so looking through here, we definitely want the test data. So that's the first thing we're going to bring over. Copy that conversation. Okay, and I generated this conversation with ChatGPT, and what's interesting to go is, agreed, definitely, absolutely, definitely, yes. I even tried to have them have an argument, and they still were agreeing with each other, which was kind of odd, but anyway, so that is our conversation. Those are all on individual lines. So what we can do next is go ahead and convert these to lines. Okay, so we go here and we paste in this line here. So it takes the conversation and it strips out any new line in the beginning, and it strips out any trailing lines here because we're using a here doc, and here doc is just a multi-line file. It's in most languages. And because this is over here as opposed to there, it would end up having a new line. So we want to strip it out on the right on the end there. And just in case there's one in the beginning, we're just taking it out. So once that is done, then we split on the new line. So a new line is a hidden character that you don't see. They're on the end of every single one of these lines. And so this will break up this into an array with each of these lines as a cell. So once that is done, we need to iterate through this. So what we'll do is grab the next line here. Whoops. Paste that in. So we say for the length of the line, so how many lines there are, iterate through them and give us I. And we need I so that we can distinguish between person 1 and person 2. And so the next line here, we bring in. It says, you know, for the first line, because it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0 being this line here, right? it says, does it start with person 1? If it starts with person 1, then we're going to strip out this part of it and assign the key to say this is who this is. So that's what we do. So we go here, right? And I'm going to say my user is going to be basically user 1, maybe me, Andrew, and then user 2, the other user will be Bako. So here on the next line, it just says replace person 1 here. So then we just get this part of the message back and we strip that part out. And we get that back with the message as the message there. Now you can see we do it for the else if. Let's do that on the next line. We'll click paste. So person 2 is the other user. And then here we have our else line. Okay. And so really it should be this line or that line. The reason why I have this one here is that anytime you write if else statements, you should always have an else, and it should raise an error, because unless you have an else for a reason, but I'm just saying, if you have no need for an else, always put an else in there to catch an error. In the case that you have one, that is a very good practice that everyone should apply. Okay, so the idea is that we've now separated out, like identified if it's user A or user B, or person 1 or person 2, and then down below here we need to go ahead and create the message. So the idea is that we need a new function called create message. Okay. And when I write code, I always try to write what I want the functions to do, and then I fill them out, right? So if I'm creating a new person, I know that DynamoDB is going to be doing this, so we're probably going to have to pass a client to it, like a DynamoDB client. This is something I know we'll have to do. We know that we need to pass a message along. We know that we need to know who the user is, so that would be like the user UID. We want to know like their display name. We want to know their handle, any kind of information we want to pass in here. Now, of course, we could pass this in as a dictionary, but I'd rather just do it this way. I don't like passing in complex objects like dictionaries and stuff into functions, because the simpler the inputs and outputs, the easier it is to test. And we know that we need a created at time. And then we know a message belongs to a message group UUID. So this feels unnatural. You just have to start getting used to it. And if you are implementing something yourself, you definitely know how your app works. But if we go back over to our design, we can validate that those are the fields that we need, because if we go here, we know a message has a message, created at, display name, user UID, and they all belong to a message group UUID. That's how we identify them. Okay. So coming back to our code here, this more or less looks correct. So where are we getting this stuff in before we put it in? So I'm sure I have this somewhere here. So let's scroll up here and just ignore the implementations. We're looking for where we get the user. So the thing is that when we run this script, we could hard code these values in. So I could go up here, above these lines, and we could have like an if-else statement to assign those values. So I could say like person A and person B, and we could, put these in dictionaries like this and say display name, handle, okay. But I think the data structure that we want, so because we set the key here, and so the idea is that if we get the data back as like a data structure as such, and we just say like my user and other user, then what we can do here, I'm just showing this as an example. I mean, you can follow along here, but we'll probably end up wiping this out. But the idea is that we can just use this data structure as what we'll pass in, okay? So, and if that's the case, then we can just reference those values there, and that's pretty much what I did. But I called it, instead of calling persons, I called it users. So we'll just go ahead and grab these 3 lines. and we'll paste that on in. And so now you can just see if it's my user, like in there, then we get that data from there. Okay, and yeah, we can hard code those values, but we want to fetch this stuff from the database. So those three values are set. We have our message above, so that's pretty straightforward. We need a created at time. It's important that we figure out the how to get this in the correct format. So the idea here is we'd have to just go above here and say created at equals now plus time delta minutes equals I. I'll explain this in a second, okay? ISO format. So we've been doing this a lot in our Python code where we've been like having this now variable. So if you remember this back in our backend Flask, go into services, somewhere where we've mocked data, maybe notifications. So we have this thing where we go datetime now, .utc as time zone, and we have now, right? So that's the first thing we want to do, is have that now. We'll define it maybe above here somewhere, like up here. And we'll just go to the top here and import this data. This line here. But yeah, if we go down below here, now our now is just whatever time it is right now. And then this is iterating through each line, so it's incrementing it by 1 minute. And so the idea is that this conversation, this is every 1 minute difference here. Okay, so it's a very fast conversation. They're clearly writing 1 minute responses, so they're obviously experts on Babylon 5, but that's what that is doing there. Okay, and then we want an ISO format. So we'll go ahead and then just paste that in. The client would just be DynamoDB. Okay, and then we have the message group UUID, which has to be created beforehand. But we'll just put a variable here for the time being and figure that out as we go. Okay, great. So we know we need a create function. So I'll go up the top here for a second. And we'll just say define create message. And just to save us a bit of time, we'll go find it here. And we'll just copy the contents here for now. Okay, great. It's just erroring out because there's nothing here. So I'll just do a print on this so that doesn't error out. Great. So we definitely need to create a message. But the idea is that we need to have these two users. And for this seed data to work, it really has to come from our database. We don't want to hard code these values in. So it's important that we have two records in Cognito and that we have the Cognito user ID set. So what we're going to have to do is query our database for those two users. Okay, so what I'm thinking here is we will need to bring in that lib directory. So coming back to our code here, if we go to the top, we need to get it from libdb. Now this directory sits here in seed. And normally, we would just call lib.db. We've been doing that in these other directories like our app.py. But it's very easy for this to import here because app.py, like lib sits right there. So it can easily find the lib directory, where this one is outside like a level up from it. So what we need to do is we need to find the absolute path of the current file, and then we need to find its parent path. So we're just going up two directories, and then we append that path to our paths, and then we can reference it locally. So that's what we're doing there. So let's go ahead and grab these lines here, and we'll paste that in. Okay. We are going to use the CLI, or sorry, the SDK, and we need to conditionally set like we have been before the endpoint URL. So we'll go ahead and grab that code in and paste that in here. Okay, and we wrote that out before, so we understand how that stuff works. So what we're going to need to do is get the user's UUIDs. Because if we get those, then what we can do, get user UUIDs. So the idea is that if we know the names of the handles of the users, we can just pass that in the query and then get back their UUID, which is the information that we need. And so in this query, what we're writing is we're just saying, it's just easier to write in the handle names. So that's why we're doing it that way. And then we can get their UUID. So I'm expecting my database to have an Andrew Brown and a Bako in there. And that's based on the seed data of our DB directory over here. So if I go in the seed directory over here, oh, sorry, not there, but in our DB SQL directory, seed here, you can see I have Andrew Brown and Bako. So they already both get inserted. So that is something that we are going to, that we need to have running and inserted because we're actually going to query that database. So what I want you to do is from here, we're going to do our bin DB, and it's going to be create. So we create our database. Then we're going to schema load. Great. And then we're going to seed our data. Okay. And we do have an error here. So it says null value in email. So I think what happened was at some point I added in email is not null in our two-error schema, and I just never updated our seed data. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Let's just fix that issue. So exampro.co, this is going to be Bako. There we go. Bako. And so we can try to seed our data again. Now, I don't think that wraps in a transaction, so I might have to drop that. So we'll go ahead and just say drop, create. I could have done setup. I should have done setup there. Schema load, and we'll do seed. Okay, great. So both the records are inserted. So now we have those two users. We can grab them based on their handle name. This one's Andrew Brown. This one is Bako. So we'll go back to our other seed data here. And going back to this script here, we want to query the users. Okay, let's do this on a new line here. And we want to say when we pass in these two handles, we should get back all their relevant data, their UUID, their display name, and their handle, because we need that data for here. And then we need to put in that data structure that I wrote up earlier. Remember we wrote that person data structure? And so that's what this code is doing down here. It's just massaging into that shape. So what we need next is the SQL statement. So paste that in. And this is just indented because we put it in a function. So this will go here. This one is just a duplicate. And so the idea is that this should return those results. So I'm going to just do print here. Users, print, users. Now the reason I'm not just copying this wholesale here is I just want to make sure that we can, because obviously we could just copy this whole file, but I want to make sure each of these steps work, and that's why it's very important for you to follow along and implement this step by step, and I might decide to make changes here. Okay, so this create function is not going to work right now because we haven't finished implementing it, but let's just run it and see what happens. Bin DDB seed. OS is not defined for the absolute paths. That's totally fine because here we want to use OS, so we'll just say import OS. And we'll hit up. Sys is not defined, of course. We'll just import that as well. Hit up. And we're having issues with the time delta. That's okay. What I'm mostly interested is, did this data return back correctly? And it does. And I thought earlier that this returns raw JSON. It actually returns a dictionary, which is totally fine. So the next thing we need to do is manipulate this data to be our end structure. So we'll go ahead and grab these lines here. Actually, all of these lines here, up to the print. And we'll go here and paste out. And I'll just fix indentation, one level here. And so what it's doing here, it's saying in this return dictionary, look for the item handle, so this handle, that matches Andrew Brown and return it. Okay, and so then that one will be my user. So basically it's selecting this one out of here and putting it in as my user. Same thing here, if the handle matches Bako in here, then return this and assign it to other users. Then we're just going to pass in as results. We're going to print it out and see what we get. So we'll go ahead and hit up. And just ignore that error, that's okay. And so it says get use IDs, and it says my user, and that's Andrew Brown, and other user as Bako. That's the data structure we wanted, as we were saying earlier. So now what I'll do is I will just put this in a function here to clean it up. So we'll go to the top here, paste that in. Indent that, and there we go. We just need the return on there, I think. So yeah, return results. And so now we can call that later on in our code. And I do believe we do call this somewhere. So down below here. Okay, great. So, and this is happening just before the message group, and we have our now.time. So let's scroll down here and see where we set this. So this is set here. And we do need those users as well. So let's go ahead and grab and paste in those users. And here you can see I'm hard coding a message group UUID. I think this is the only case where I'm doing the hard coding because it's so much easier to do it this way. In our system, it would generate out a UUID. But you can just use this one because it doesn't really matter. We're just going to set it as this one to make it our lives really easy, okay? So just go ahead and paste that in. And so now we have all of that data. So all those 3 lines are in there. And so this message, even though the message group doesn't exist, if by having that, we're just pretending like it already does exist. And from there, we can see if our create message throws a new error. Okay, so now we're having this date time delta object has no attribute ISO format. So I might have just messed up the syntax here. So we'll go back and check for the ISO format. As time zone, let's take a look. What did I do? Oh, well, that's for the now statement, right? So we're looking for now up here. And so that looks correct. Yep, that is right. But I think the issue is it's having a problem with this line. Oh, time delta. Okay. So let's take a look and see if I messed it up. We'll just copy the line and see if it's the same or not. It's identical. Okay. So let's take a read and see what it's saying. So it says date time delta object has no attribute ISO format. And one thing I noticed that's slightly different is that this one, oh, it's where the parentheses end. So I got the parentheses in the wrong order here, sorry. There we go. And so that would resolve that issue. We'll hit up. DDB is not defined. That's totally fine because, well, I think we named it something else when we copied and pasted it over. So we'll go up here. And you know what? I prefer DDB. I think it's just easier. So I'm going to just change it to that. We'll hit up. Great. And our create message doesn't do anything right now. So that is in good shape so far. We do need to create a message group before we create our messages. So let's just scroll up here. And where do we call this? We must call it somewhere, right? Oh, before our conversation. And we need 2 message groups because remember when we designed our thing the other day, we said that it needs to create a message group from the perspective of the other user to show them the other information. Okay. So what we can do here is just copy these 2 here. And this is going to go above our conversation. We'll go ahead and paste. And so nothing crazy here. The idea is that we pass in the client. I'm just rename that to DB. We generate out the message group and then we're going to assign it to it. So we need to bring that up higher, that message group UUID. We probably need our now above as well, and also our users. So I'll just cut those and we will bring them above here. There we go. So yeah, we need the other user UID, the other user handle, the other user display name, the last message at. That looks like a capital. I'm going to double check. Nope, that's just how it looks. And again, we know that we need that information because it's based on what we wrote in our visual diagram, which is here, other display name, replied at, last message. I forgot to put the handle in here. So, I mean, the handle would probably show somewhere. But yeah, that's clear for those two there. Okay, so now we need to implement the message group. So here we have this code here. And it's pretty simple. We have like a put item. So I'm just going to copy the contents of it. And we will put that right above the definition of the create message. And we'll just take a look at the code here. So the idea is we have the table name here, CRUD messages. We want to insert a record, so we have to provide a primary key, or a partition key. We absolutely know that because the partition key always has to be passed in when creating. We have our range key, so we have to provide that as well. If we create a record, if we create a table, a composite primary key, right? Where we say we need to have a partition and a sort key, then you have to provide them. So we have to provide them. In this case, looking at our Excel spreadsheet, I'm just looking for where we put that. Our data modeling. We said that when creating a message group, we have to have GRP. So we have that. We're passing the user UUID. So in this case, I'm just saying my user UUID to specify that it's for me, from the perspective of me. So it's a little bit more clear. And then in the sort key, we said last reply at. We just say last message at. It's a slight syntax difference there. We're going to store the message group user ID, UUID, the message, the user UID, the user display name, the user handle for those there. So yeah, same thing here. You have user UID, user handle, stuff like that. These all indicate that these are strings. So strings. There are numbers, there are binaries, there are other values, but for the most part, we just need strings. So we say put item, which will write to the database. We pass the table name here, we get a response. The reason I put this here, instead of putting it as a variable above, I guess we could have, but I couldn't remember if the variable would get passed in, and I didn't want to have to pass the table name in here, so I just hard-coded it in. So that will create the message group. Let's go take a look at the message. It's going to be very similar. So just copy that part. That comment doesn't make sense anymore, this comment here. Doesn't really help. And so we'll go ahead and paste this in here. And if we take a look here, let's compare it to our data model. So in our data model, we said, when we create a message, it'll start with MSG, which is here, MSG. We have the message group UUID, that's fine. The created at, which is fine there. We generate out the UUID. We didn't do that for the message group because we need to reliably query that message group UUID, but for this we generate it out because it's we don't want to hard code all those values, so that makes more sense there. We'll have our message, the my user UUID. You get the idea. Strings, it's a put item, similar thing. Hard code the table name in there again. We'll just put there at the top like the other one. That means we will have to have this UUID in here. So I'll go to the top. And we'll go ahead and paste this. Now, based on Kirk's suggestion, we are going to prepend this with group and message. I think that's what we said. Yeah. I thought, is that what we said? We would put GRP in front of there? I don't know. I don't think that we need to do this, but I think that what we are going to do based on Kirk's suggestion was to make sure that we limit based on using begins with, to say like get us data for 2012 so we can limit the amount of records that we're querying. We do have a limit, but I want to use that additional filter, but we don't really need this part. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that out because I don't feel that I need it because we redundantly have it here. So I'm changing my mind, but we are still going to do take Kirk's suggestion and apply basically like a begins with onto our sort key. Okay. So I think that's everything. Let's just take a look here if I'm missing anything. So we did this, we did that. Message group, create the message. Table name is fine. Create the two messages. Yeah, so that is the seed file. Let's make sure that we rename them from DynamoDB to just DDB. Otherwise, that will error out. So we'll just go down the message groups here. DDB, that's good, DDB. Okay, great. So let's see if this works. So I'll hit up. And it says cannot do operation on non-existent table, which is totally fine. Let's go take a look at where, what is the name of our table? Creditor messages. So that table should exist. Let's list our tables to make sure. Oh, it doesn't exist. Okay, that's fine. So we'll just reload our schema. Now we'll list our tables. And now we'll do our seed data. It created a bunch of records. Okay, so we created a bunch of messages there, but it might have not been the most efficient way to do it. We might have wanted to do a batch write item. Because remember that when you are using DynamoDB, you are utilizing read and write credits or RCUs and WCUs. And so sometimes it's more efficient to do a batch write item and it could result in a lower cost. But since we're doing local development, I'm not worried about it, okay? And I don't expect you to seed your data on your server. So that's also not an issue, at least not right now. If we do end up seeding data on the production server, I'll probably write a batch write as opposed to doing a bunch of puts like that. Okay, so all that data is in there. Now, how can we be sure that it is there? So I'm thinking we should do a scan. So what we'll do is go here on the left-hand side. We'll say new file. I'm going to type in scan. And we'll use the CLI for this again. So I'm just going to make a new tab here. And I think we use it there. So I'll copy that. We'll paste that in. We want our bash script here. Or you know what? I'd rather just do it as SDK. Let's do an SDK instead. Because that's something that we could reuse. It's just like I'm thinking like if we can reuse that code in the Flask app, I'd rather do it as SDK. But those other CLI commands, those are just things that we're quickly looking up. So I'm just going to do this here. And we'll say import Boto3. We will need our attribs like the other one there before. So we'll just go ahead and grab this stuff here. All this stuff here is fine. I'm just grabbing that from our seed data. And in this case, it's not client, it's resource. I know it seems a bit strange, but that's just how it is. And we'll put the table name here. Creditor messages. You might ask, like, why is one client, one's resource? I don't know. But when I looked up how to do this, and I even asked ChatGPT, like if we go to ChatGPT and ask them, that's what they showed me. So I'll just say like, write a scan in DynamoDB using Boto3. So it does resource, okay? And so that's basically what we're doing here. So we're doing something similar. So we have our table name here, and We'll type in table. So we'll do DynamoDB.table, table name, response equals table.scan, and we'll do items, response, items, for item in items, print item. Okay, and we can also just print out the response so we can see what it looks like first as well. You know, if you ever want to know what gets returned back from these APIs, we can simply go back a directory here. List, or sorry, scan, we're doing a scan. So we go here, we can see the output and it shows us all the attributes. It's not very nice way of visualizing it, but it's, well, here's a better example. So you can see it'll show us the count, the amount of items, or the actual items that are being returned, the scan count and consume capacity. If you want the consume capacity, we have to put an additional flag there. I'm not sure what flag it is here. Consumed. Yeah, so we could put this flag in additional. I didn't do this in my original code, but I'm going to add it into ours so we can see it. So I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, add return, it should show consumed capacity. Let's see if we can figure that out. I don't think it's setting that. Okay, well, let's just give it a go and see what it returns. So we'll go here. And the reason we're doing the scan is to see the contents of the CRUD or messages, what's actually in there. So we've got bin. DBD, scan. Whoops. I guess we have to chmod that first, u plus x. There we go. So this is not defined, of course, it's not. I don't know if we'd ever want to do a scan on production. You know what, I'm going to take this part out because I don't feel like we're ever going to be scanning on production. We'll just want to make this work locally. So we'll just hard code that to always use that. Because scans can be very expensive, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And if we want to do a scan, we can use the AWS console to do that. So I'm just going to not do that there. DynamoDB is not defined. It's because we renamed it, because now I've decided to do DDB. We'll hit enter. And so here you can see we are getting data back. Okay, so our records are being inserted. It's not the easiest way to look at that data, but at least the scan shows us everything. So that is interesting there. Okay, so we know the data has been inserted. We seeded our data. So maybe the next thing that would be useful to do is to query the data for the structure that we want. So I did this where I have like a get conversation, list conversation. These things, I wrote them and then I broke them. So they're in a broken state right now. So we'll have to fiddle with them to make them work. But I think that's what I'd like to do, is be able to see that stuff before we start implementing the stuff into our code. And you know what, I could have called these access patterns, because technically that's kind of what these are, is access patterns. So I'm going to make a new folder in here. So I'm deviating from what I wrote before. We'll say patterns. And I'm just going to say list. So we'll just say get conversation. And I'll make a new one here. And this one will be called list conversations. And here I forgot to put the S on there. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is the get conversation. So let's go ahead and just grab all this code and take a look at it. Okay, so we're using Bodo 3 as per usual. It looks like we can do this against production as well, because I set it up to check for prod. We have our message group UUID, so we hard coded it so that it was a lot easier for us to query that kind of stuff. And in here, we have the query command. And so in here, we're going to pass the parameters. So we set the return consume capacity total. If you set this is what I was looking for in the scan. I wanted it to return the consume capacity. And actually, you know what? We never even looked at the full results of what was returned from the other one, which would almost be impossible to see. So like when we did the scan here, this response was useless because there's so much line data that I can't even see what I'm looking at. So that's interesting. But going back to, we want to get conversation. I pasted this in list conversations. I'm so sorry. We'll go ahead here and cut this code out and put it in the right folder so we don't get confused. Okay. So anyway, this return consume capacity total is what we use to get the consume data back, because we want to see that to see how expensive our call was. So we specify our table name. We specify our key condition. So this is like a weird thing you always have to do with DynamoDB is you first have to say, you know, what key, like take your key and define it to a variable. And then in your expressions attribute values, reference that here. And that's just how it works. So what we're doing really here, this thing here is we're implementing this query here. So in here, whoops, if I can show it to you. So up here, you see where it says like partition key user ID equals this value. That's what we're doing. So we're saying this partition key equals message group UUID. If we look at our data model, right, we said that in order to find this user, we need to know what the message group UUID, and by doing that, it will return all the messages for that, all the messages in that conversation between those two users. Okay. The next thing we do is we just query it. So we run our query. And then the next idea is that we want to print the results here. So we did json.dumps because it prints it a lot nicer. Whereas if we did a plain print, it doesn't look very clean. Then we print out the consume capacity so we can see what does it cost. Again, we're wrapping in this json.dumps to just make it prettier. Then we extract out the items, and then I try to print them in a tidy way that's easy to read. So let's go ahead, type in clear here. And I'm just going to stretch this over so I'm not blocking any of the view here. And we're just going to chmod this first file here. Whoops. U plus X. It's going to be bin DDB patterns get conversation. Hit enter. Okay, so now we'll do bin DDB patterns get conversation and hit enter and see what happens. And we have some errors here. So I told you this thing was broken because I can't remember what state I left it in. Line 6, attribs not found, endpoint URL not found, syntax error, etc., etc. So I apologize for leaving a broken state, but we're moving pretty quick there. We didn't specify what type of file this is, and that's probably why it's erroring out. So up here in the seed, we're just going to grab this line here. I'm going to go ahead and paste it in. And so that should resolve that issue there. At least that's what I think. So I'll hit up. We want to hit up to run it, not to chmod it. And so now we are getting results. So here we have our conversation back and forth. We can see our consumed capacity. So here it shows our capacity units was 1. That's how much we spent of our consumed capacities. Then if we go up here, we can see all of our raw data. So this is our data structure. So nothing exciting. It does return the consumed capacity here. I just printed it out down below to find it a bit easier. It shows us how many items it returned, which was 20. Okay, so let's go take a look at our query again. So we said to limit it to 20. We said scan index forward. So that is the way you do ascending or descending. So I think by default, the scan is true forward. So it'd be ascending to descending. And so to get it into the opposite direction, we would have to do a false on that. At least that's what I think. So if we're looking at here, the time should increase as we get to the bottom. So it looks like it's actually supposed to be the other way. I couldn't remember which way it was. So the idea is just change it, and then the way it is the way we need it. So this is 7:53 p.m. What if we go the other direction? Sorry. That looks right to me, but why do we have a later time? Oh, that was the day before. That's why, because there's that many records. Let's go forward again. Huh. Interesting. Scan index forward. It seems like here, because that's interesting. So like if we do false here, right? If we do false, it's showing them like the newest at the top. We actually want the newest at the bottom, which is totally fine. But this seems like it's the latest one. So this is right, but it's in the wrong order. So all I would do here is reverse this order here. So I'm not really sure how to do that. So reverse an array in Python. In Ruby, you just call dot reverse. I guess in here, you do this. So I'll just copy this line here, because we have to reverse it. And we'll paste that in there. Hit up. It's not called my array. It's called items. We'll go hit up. There we go. Now it's displaying the correct way. So there's just that kind of stuff that you have to think about when you are getting the query. When I implemented this, I wasn't even carefully checking the result. Like I could see it rendered in the application, but at the time I was just trying to get the implementation done, and I was going to worry about these things later down the road. So you can see here, we do item, select the user handle, and then it's a string. They're all nested like this. That's just how DynamoDB is. It doesn't come out nice and clean. You have to do a little bit of work on them. And then here, we took the timestamp and we're just formatting it here for local. I don't even know how to do this. I had to ask ChatGPT, and it gave me the older version. So in like Python 3.10 and above, it's different. And we're using Python, version 3.8. So this is the version for that. And then before Python 3, it was done a different way. So I'm just saying that if you run into errors because you're not using Gitpod, you're using something else, it could be because of the Python version. You'll have to ask and like ChatGPT or look on Stack Exchange for your particular version of Python. But I did have a lot of trouble around getting this to format in the way that I wanted it to. And if you're wondering what these numbers do, they just make the spaces in between here. So like if I take this here and I do like 12, hit up, notice that the space is closed down a bit more. So that's just a way of using, it's a way of formatting prints. Cover that in my unpublished cloud programming course. Okay, so that is all good. The only other thing that I might want to do here is take Kirk's suggestion and apply a filter on the sort key. Okay, so that's something that we want to do. I imagine it's very similar for key expression. So I'm not sure. So we'll just say a key expression for the sort or for the partition, and sort key example for query in DynamoDB. We'll just see what example we get for it. That is not what I expected out. So here, that is a different way of doing it. I suppose that's one way you can do it. That is not the way that I know how to use it. So what I'm going to do is go look up the Boto 3 documentation, and we're going to take a look at what we can do for queries. So go to the query. Again, you can't always trust ChatGPT. They'll do some funny things, but you wouldn't know unless you are working with this on a regular basis. So here we have our key conditions, and then we have our attribute value list. I'm just trying to figure out how do we do it for both of them, because I just don't remember how. And so I'm trying to find examples. I remember they had examples here earlier, so I'm going to go here and go down to DynamoDB examples. Type in DynamoDB code examples. I'm looking for that key expression. expression attribute values. Or sorry, key condition expression. Just show me one where there's two of them. Okay. So I'll just go here, key expression examples DynamoDB, because they're not showing me both of them. Okay, so here's a more, I mean, this is using the CLI and that's totally fine. So A for artist and this. Okay, so I want to know what it was. And I thought it was end, but I just wanted to double check. So here we're going to say end. It will say sk equals s key. And there's no reason we had to call it p key. We could just said pk there and done that. But sometimes it's useful if you want to remap it for what it actually is. So, I mean, that could matter, but anyway, I'm just going to do sk. And so we don't want to say sk equals colon sk. Well, we do there, but the idea is down below here, we want to do the begins with. Or maybe we do want to do it up here. Let's go take a look and see what they do. So I want a begins with example. We'll go back to the syntax of Boto here. Here it is. So begins with is what I'm looking for. And if we go back to that other example here, it says T1. I guess the idea is that this is whatever you feed into here. So maybe I'm thinking of it the wrong way. It's not sk equals that. It would be sk betweens with, and that's whatever you want that value to be. And so we could just say like year, and then that would be a lot more clear. I guess the question is what does this look like in our raw data? So if we go up here and look at our date, yeah, so it looks like this. And so what we could do is just take 2023 and put that in there. And then we'd say a year here. And then we do S, I suppose. And then it would just be like that. And I think it wants a comma there. Okay. So let's go and see if that works. Clear. So it says begins with token. So invalid key expression syntax error, token begins with near colon year. So however I did that is not correct. Begins with DynamoDB example. Not with party queue, we just want to see how to use it. Yeah, I figured it'd be something like with parentheses like that, because it's like a function. So I'm thinking that's what it is. So we go sk here, like that, and then take it out as such, and see if it likes that syntax instead. All I'm doing is hitting up here. So go ahead and hit up. Invalid function name, function begins with. What are you talking about? It definitely exists. Okay, using the AWS CLI, write a query using begins with on the sort key. Because if you're using the CLI, it's not going to use like this weird DSL, this domain specific language, and we'll get a clear example of exactly how to use it. Okay, thank you. Stop writing. Stop generating. Thank you. Okay. So here, oh, it is. Begins with. Now they use all lowercase. I don't know if that matters. But we have begins with, sort key name, and then sort value, and that's what we did. So let's just try lowercase, begins with. And did I spell that wrong? Maybe it's just begin. It's begins with, right? Okay, so we'll just go here. Paste that in. It didn't need like quotations, did it? No. And we'll hit up. We'll try this again. There we go. So I guess it's just lowercase. Let's try this again. Yeah, begins with, up, doesn't like it, begins with lowercase. Now it likes it, and yet we saw in the documentation it was over here. Here it shows begins with. Oh, key expression. Maybe that's like this is a legacy parameter, so maybe we were just misled there and I wasn't looking at it. And so in the newer syntax it has lowercase. But anyway, so now we're just filtering the information. This looks good. So it wouldn't return anything different. If we want to make sure that it absolutely is working, what we could do as a sanity check is find any of them, like this one, and we could just do this. Okay, because then it would only show like 1 or 2. So it only shows that message, so that's perfect. So what we'll do is take this out here like this and save it and hit up. Now, should we only return for the current month, or could we use between times? So like if we were to put in let's see here. I don't think we would have been able to use the between if we had stuffed or overloaded it with this in the front here. So if we had put this in the front, I don't know if that between statement would have worked. Let's go take a look at the between statement and see if we can use it. We'll just say here, write using the AWS CLI, write a query that checks between 2 date times on the sort key. Let's see if it does it. I want to see it uses the between. Okay, I don't need it to talk to me. Okay, so here it says between start date and end date, and then it shows the format of the string being this, and then the end date being this. And the thing is that we're using a very particular format, the ISO standard. So what I want to do is just give ChatGPT a little bit more information and just tell it what format the string in is. And the thing is that DynamoDB does not natively support, doesn't like have a date time, but there is a format that it prefers when filtering out data. And then if you were to dump this data over to S3 and then use Athena to analyze it, then it likes a different type of format. But anyway, what I'm going to do is just give it this format and say, fix the update the last CLI command to work with this date time format. Now let's see if it can handle that. Okay, we'll just stop it there. It cut off. Why did it cut off? Maybe I didn't let it finish generating. Okay, and we'll go ahead and copy that and bring this back. And we'll go down here. Whoops, I'm just bringing it in. Okay. And so what I just want here is the alternate. So in here, this would be the start date, end date. Okay, so just go ahead and grab this like this. Or just clear out the line here a bit. So we have a start date and an end date. Maybe we can put this as the last line, that way I can comment these other ones out. And so the idea is that we could have this key, or it could be like betweens with. But the reason I want to put both of these in because I'll decide later, what works better for us. If it's this or that. Because if you did it a month, then, like, let's say you're 1 day over and you filter on month, that's no good because you need to go back, let's say 30 days. Okay, I'm just looking at this here. So this is 0103 to 0109. And so we'll just comment out this line here, and we'll comment out that line. I don't think it would error out if that was in there. And I just want to see if that still works. This is complaining for some reason. I'm not sure why. It's because of this line? No. Undo. Let's just, I think someone told me to just say always allow, and then that will stop popping up. I apologize. I know that people have told me that before. Unexpected indent where return consume capacity. We'll bring that in one. Does that fix that? No. Why is that a problem? It wasn't a problem before. Let's take this up a line, I suppose, and just move it out of the way so I have less of a problem with it. Where's our indent problem? I don't see it. We have an indent problem. But they all look perfect to me. Okay, we'll try it again here and see what it says. Unmatched. Maybe we're missing one. We maybe have an unbalanced amount of these. Because this would go to here. Oh, here. No, that one has one. That one has one. That one has one. That one has one. Seems like there's one missing here. Nope, it's this one. I think it's this one. There we go. Hit up. Oh, it's because there's no parentheses on the end here. So we'll hit up and see if we get any data back. And so this is working. That's cool. Okay, so now we have two options available to us for the time being. I'm going to stick with the year, but we'll leave this one around here if we want to use it later, okay? And so now we have a way of getting the conversation. And so we've just implemented one of our access patterns. And so this code, we can bring it over now and figure that out. So let's go take a look at list conversation. And we will do the same thing as before. We will go back a step. We'll go to list conversation here, and we will grab the code. Make sure we grab the first line this time around. And we'll go ahead and paste it in. And we'll go to the top here. So we have an endpoint URL. It could run against production. That's fine. We have the table name as creditor messages. We've hard-coded the UUID of the Andrew Brown user. Now, this value actually has to be updated. You can't just take this value. Now, I call it Brown user. It could just be a generic user. So I'll just say my user, like whoever you decided that you are. So I'm just going to remove that specificity to me. Now, this value is going to be whatever's in your table. Now, we could have wrote a query to go grab it. I just thought it was overkill, and I just wanted to hard-code it. So that's why it's hard-coded here. So what we can do is go ahead and grab that from the database. So just going down to the Postgres tab here, I'm going to do PSQL, or we'll just use our command there. So we'll say cd back in Flask, and we'll do bin db connect. And then from there, I'll just say select UUID and handle from users. And so this is the one that I currently have set. So I'm just going to grab that and put that in there. Now, remember, every time you reseed your database, you'd have to update that value. If you don't want to do that, you can bring in that RDS code, like what we did over in the scan. But or not the scan, but the seed data, I don't have much interest in doing that. I guess we could do it. I suppose we can do it. Fine, let's just do it. It'll take a second. Sometimes I just don't want to do it, and then, I don't know why. I'm just lazy. Okay, so we'll go ahead and paste that in. It'll just take 2 seconds. For me, it will anyway. We'll go down to the DB, and we'll just say, get the UUID here. We'll just grab something similar here. So paste. Get my user UUID. We'll say users for handles. we'll just say equals, and then it'll just be handle here. We'll take that off there. And instead of this, we'll do query value, because that should only return a single value. And now instead it's just handle. And yeah, we can leave it on multi-line there. And then instead here, we'll just say get my handle there. And this will just be the UUID, and we will return that UUID. And so hopefully that will work. Just in case it doesn't, we'll just say my UUID. I'll print it on the next line. I mean, I don't know why I don't just do it in line. I'm just, again, lazy about this, but we could do that and do interpolation. I just find interpolation a bit harder in Python for some reason, or at least I don't remember how to do it half the time. Okay, so that will print out the UUID. So you don't have to worry about that hard code anymore. So down below, we said that our access pattern was to do grp my user ID. That's what it looks like here. Okay, I know we didn't put the my in there. I just put it in here because it's a lot more clear, like from whose perspective it is. We want the total capacity so we can see what the spend is. I don't like how it's just PK. I'm just gonna change it to PK there. We can do the same thing and limit the expression. We'll do that like the sort key. We'll do that in a moment here. So we do query, we dump the data. It's very simple. You can even see that I didn't even bother formatting the stuff there. So we'll go back up here. We will chmod this one, u plus x, bin ddb, list conversations, or sorry, patterns, list conversations. And I'm going to do that. DDB patterns, list conversations. Whoops. OS is not defined. Oh, that's fine. We'll just import OS. We need it for this part. Hit up. No module name this. It's because we have to go up one more directory. There we go. That should fix that. I guess I should make a comma when I mean to do that. So we'll do that. And we'll hit up. Has no attribute called query value. Well, what did I call it then? I could have swore I called it that. So we'll go check in our lib directory. It's just when I want to grab an individual value. I could have swore that I did implement that. Query commit, query array JSON, query object JSON. No, it doesn't look like. So I must have implemented it in this week. And I thought I had it in last week. So sometimes we just want to grab a single value and not return a JSON object or stuff like that. So in the backend Flask app, this is in week 5. I already have the code for it. So we'll go into the lib directory here, and we'll go into DB. And I should have a new function in here called query value. Here it is. When you want to return a single value. Where did that go? There we go. So we'll go ahead and grab that code. And we'll go up here. And I'll just put it over here. It's fine. I have these nice comments to say like what the case is, but we know what it is. So here it's just going to run execute and fetch 1. Whereas in these other ones, we're wrapping them in the stuff and calling fetch 1. So we're pretty much just removing a single line in order to get what we want here. We'll hit up and see if that just works. Print SQL takes 3 positional arguments, but we were given 4. 1, 2, 3. Oh, you know what? Another change I made was that when we print out the SQL, it wasn't showing with the items inserted, and that was making it very difficult to debug. It was just showing like the actual templates. So if we went over to, where is it here? To the SQL here. It's like it was printing out this, but I couldn't see what was being passed through. And so I modified all these to take a third parameter in the SQL for params. So let's go take a look at that code. So go to the top here, or not the top, but to SQL. And so we have params in here. and then we print the params. Okay. Oh, sorry. So the idea is that we have SQL and then we pass it to params, and then it prints the params within the SQL. And so that was what we were doing there. That'll be very clear when we see it printed to the screen. So what we'll do here is go up to the SQL or the print statement wherever we have it here. Yes. And now we will just add this here like that. And then we just do that. And it's as simple as that. And we're going to get richer data when we print out our values. So we'll go down here. We'll hit up. If we scroll up, this is what I mean, where it's printing out the template and then it passes the parameters as the second one and prints them. Now, I would prefer if these were rendered inline. I'm not sure why it's not doing that. So, and also, why is there an underscore there? I guess this is how it displays. But maybe we can improve that and actually print it out as the value substituted, because I think that's what I would honestly prefer. But anyway, so now we can see like what's being passed in what area in our queries. Query parameter missing underscore handle. I'm pretty sure it's not called that, so maybe we introduced an error there. So let's go back over to this. Yes, so that was an accident. The equals is still fine there. That's totally fine. Okay, we'll hit up. And we'll go look at our printout of our query. Okay, so that is very clear what we're getting. And here it shows 0.5 is our consumed capacity. We've returned 1 record. And it's listing the conversation because we only have 1 from our perspective. So it's not like we're printing out a lot of data, so it's pretty easy there. So that access pattern is now satisfied. If we wanted to, we could mock more data. We probably should at some point, but right now I'm not too worried about it. We have our lists, we have our get working, so that's all good. Back in our database here, we need to update this print SQL so it's passed to all of them, just because that'll be very useful for us. So I'll go here and put in params, and I'll go here and put in params. Yeah, and it was only the 3 there, I believe, so that's good there. Okay, so I'm just going to see if there's anything else I want to do here before we start moving into the actual implementation to our application, but it seems like we've covered all of our convenient scripts here. So I'm just going to check this here, and we're going to go into our bin directory here and DDB and just check here. So yeah, we did all of these. The only one we didn't do was setup, and I didn't find that worked very reliably, so I'm just not going to bother with doing the setup there. We'll go ahead and commit that, and so create all of our, we're finished creating our utility. Scripts working with DynamoDB. Okay, so there we go. We'll commit that, sync the changes. I'm going to give it a refresh here just to make sure there's nothing missing there. And yeah, so there you go. And the next video, we will actually look to implement it into the front end and back end application. Ciao.